Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Carrie and I am the Professional Learning and Development Coordinator with City of Dublin ETB. You're all really welcome to this session this afternoon. In this section entitled Ideas to Ignite Learning, we're going to show you a number of short video segments from across the sector. A number of ETBs will be represented in this segment, and we could have shown you so many more. We have over 30 contributions in total from across our whole sector. But by going to our dedicated FET YouTube channel afterwards, you're going to find so many more ideas to ignite your learning, and we thank each and every contributor for sharing their projects and ideas. The first one up is Michael Hallissy. Michael is a former primary school teacher with over 25 years experience working in the field of digital education. Michael founded H2 Learning in 2002 with his colleague John Hurley, and this is a vibrant consulting, project management and professional learning company. H2 Learning is a recognised leader in European Commission Erasmus Plus projects, all around the implementation and evaluation of projects, again in the area of digital education. Most recently, you may know Michael and his colleagues in H2 Learning have been working with schools and further education organisations to design and to implement pedagogically sound online and blended learning events. He has worked extensively with our further education support service, FES, over the past year on a number of initiatives, including reimagining your course, the move to blended learning, and reimagining your assessment for remote learners. In this pre-recorded segment, Michael will explore teaching and learning as it spans BC, DC and AC, before COVID, during COVID and after COVID. So I hope that you'll enjoy this piece from Michael. If you just want to bear with us just for 1 second and we will get the volume working on that, that would be great.
How we might reimagine teaching, learning and assessment after COVID-19. So in H2 Learning, we developed a TeachNimble blended learning framework to help organizations, schools, FET providers to design and implement blended learning, and that's what I'm going to focus on today and share some suggestions and thoughts with you around what that might look like as we come out of COVID and get back to some sort of normality during the coming year. So to frame the discussion, I use this timeline, BC, DC and AC. And BC refers to before COVID, which is now being regarded as the period of before March 12th, 2020. And then I'm going to look at during COVID, which is DC, and after COVID, which is AC. So I think it's worth remembering that digital technology was part of our learning environments and part of the learning process before the arrival of COVID-19, but it probably was used in different ways than we used it during COVID-19. And on the screen here, you can see that typically learners brought their devices to a lecture or to a class, and the instructor, the educator, used digital technology to present materials, and also the learners on the second image used it to create materials and to submit assignments, etc. But we saw during COVID that this changed. And during COVID, we entered a phase which we have now has become known as emergency remote teaching. And this was typically a mix of online learning with digital technology, and sometimes it was mixed with a limited use of face-to-face. But the key thing here is that it was different from what had typically had happened in the past. And the key difference, as we all know, is that we were unable to be in our classrooms, in our labs, in our workshops with our learners, and therefore we had to use digital technology to connect at a distance, and that is where this emergency remote instruction came into play. And this emergency remote teaching saw our homes become transformed into environments that were supporting work, it was supporting people teaching, it was supporting learning. So all of these things were happening in the one space, and it was very, very traumatic for all of them. And during this time, a mix of models emerged around distance learning. We had some limited in person, we had a lot of virtual, as I said, people on computers dialing in from home or wherever. And we also had the virtually impossible, where people found it very, very challenging to teach, to learn, and to raise their families in their homes. So it was a tough time for everybody. And I suppose we're all looking forward now to getting beyond this and to getting back to some sense of normal. And this emergency remote teaching, I think it's well worth reiterating again and again that this is not the same as blended learning. At the time, a lot of people were calling it online learning, virtual learning, distance learning, but there was more and more research during the period that this was emergency remote teaching and that it was very different from blended learning, because blended learning is something that we can plan for, it's designed, and what we were doing was we were all responding to a crisis and we were doing our best and we didn't have control of all the cards. So I think it's well worth keeping this in mind when we now return and think about what we can do and what bits we'll keep and what bits of the emergency remote teaching we will leave behind. So now, the $100 million question, reimagining further education and training experiences after COVID-19, the AC piece. And in this, I think we should be thinking about the re-emergence of blended learning. It's not a new idea, it's been around for more than 20 years, but what might blended learning look like in my FET context or in my ETB going forward? And what are some of the new blends that we might bring to our learners so that they have a more flexible learning experiences into the future? So thinking about the future and thinking about blended learning, first of all, it's an ill-defined term, so I'm not even going to give you a definition of it here today, but it is, one of the ways that I like to think about it is based on some research from Al Mary and colleagues in Australia, is this idea of a low impact blend, a medium impact blend, and a high impact blend. And a low impact blend might be that you use some digital tools like Kahoot with your learners in a classroom in an in-person setting. And this is a low impact blend for you as an educator because you only have to learn how to use Kahoot. But using that tool effectively can have a huge benefit, a very high impact on your learners and on their learning. And a recent example was of an instructor who used a Kahoot quiz with his learners and saw that they didn't understand what he was doing, and then he went back and he rethought the material. So that's one way I think that we will see more and more use of digital technology in the future. The second is this idea of a medium impact blend, where we replace an activity in an existing course or program. And here the teacher might record a presentation in advance of the class, their face-to-face session, and then the learners might go in and they access it online, maybe on Moodle or on Teams or on Google Classroom. And then the face-to-face interaction session might be shorter, or it might be more focused on discussion and deliberation. And that's called the flipped classroom, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. And during COVID-19, we saw a lot of emerging practice around these flipped classroom blends. The third one is a high impact blend. And this is where a college or a FET organization designs a blended learning course or a program from the ground up, from scratch. And they really build into it supports for their teachers and for their learners. And It could consist of a mix of online and face-to-face learning. And there are models out there already on the school side, things like the Gaeltacht Hub project, where students are learning physics remotely online. But this new high impact blend could also allow an ETB to have an element of the program online, so that people don't have to travel all the time to a physical location. And then on certain days or at certain periods, the learners would come together face to face, and that could be as a kind of a more active workshop type event, and more of the theoretical content delivery is done online. So these are options that we have going forward. And one of the examples that I think is really that I like a lot is this idea of the active blended learning, ABL, and Northampton, the University of Northampton has done a lot of work in this area, and I've shared the link with you there on screen if you want to have a look at it yourself. And what I like about it is they put their emphasis on the learner being actively engaged, and they on their website they have some descriptions of what active learning looks like and what it doesn't look like. And I'm just going to read one or two of them for you. The very first one: learner-centered and interactions-based, suitable balance between learner-to-tutor interaction, learner-to-learner interaction, and learner-to-content interaction, and face-to-face. And it says what is not ABL is where it's based on a one-way delivery, for example, broadcasting a lecture or by uploading online content. The next one is just about context, and they say context is king. Content is important, but its application in context is key. What matters is what students do with the content, why, and with whom. So again, and it's not, they also go on to say it's not just about putting content up on an LMS like Moodle or whatever. You have to do something with it. So it's all about learner engagement and about active learning and transformational practices, so that you're engaging your learners and helping them to really gain the knowledge or master the skills that they need to acquire. So when you are planning and considering your blend, I like to think of the analogy of blending gin and taking the botanicals, and depending on the botanicals you select and the measures, you can develop different kinds of blends. And this idea emanated from some work that a good friend of mine, Professor Deirdre Butler, and I were doing with Donegal ETB earlier in the year. And I'm going to share very quickly with you the approach that we have taken, and it might help you to think about blending when you get back in with your learners in the new academic year. So the first thing we have to think about when we're planning is, where will the learning take place? And we have options here. Again, we didn't have all of these during COVID-19, during emergency remote teaching, but when we're back in with our learners, we will have options around in-person. So when we are in the space with them physically, we can also do things online live with our learners and with others. We can bring people into our classrooms. And then there's also the idea that we can do more with our learners around self-directed learning. We can provide them with materials that they can review and go through on their own, in their own time. So having considered the environment where the learning is going to take place, then we can think about learning strategies. And on the slide here, we have 6 learning strategies, and these are based on the work of Professor Diana Laurie-Lard and her colleagues in University College London. And they are acquisition, collaboration, discussion, investigation, practice, and production. And what we found during COVID-19 was that a lot of what was happening in the early phases was around acquisition, that learners were being provided with material, they were being asked to watch or listen to videos or listen to PowerPoints or to read material, etc. And there wasn't as much emphasis maybe on collaboration and providing time and space for discussion, or setting them a task to go off and investigate, or to practice some skills on their own, or to maybe engage in production, where they were asked either on their own or in teams to produce an artifact. And we also learned that when we're using technology and, you know, during the emergency remote teaching, that we need to also constantly think about the social emotional well-being of our learners. And finally, when we are using digital technology, it provides new opportunities for assessment. So again, we need to factor in all of these when we return AC after COVID, when we are designing our learning and assessment experiences. And when we are putting these designs together, we have an ever increasing range of digital tools or digital technologies. And here in front of us now, we have this thing called the technology wheel. And in the center, we have a range of tools that many of you are using, things like Office 365 or Microsoft Teams, where they actually can help you to implement all of the learning strategies. But there are certain tools that are particularly good to support acquisition, to support production, collaboration, discussion, investigation, or practice. And the message I'd like to give you here is we don't need to know all these tools necessarily, but certainly if we're using a particular platform, whether it's Office 365 or Google Classroom, then we should really think about maximizing that tool so that we're using it in as many ways as possible for the learning strategies that we are trying to implement with our learners. So what might your blend look like? And this is the key point for me, that depending on your context, and again going back to Northampton, they talked about context. Depending on your context, you will design a different blend from your colleagues, and you may want to, on occasions, to design low impact blends. On other occasions, you may want to design a medium impact blend, but depending on your context, it will look differently, and you'll have to think about the modalities, the learning strategies, and the learning technologies, and plan for that, and that is what is going to define your blend. And adding into that is this idea of the flipped classroom, which can align with your thinking about your blend. And again, the flipped classroom is an old idea. It's been around for some time. And it has, if we think about it in terms of events, there are 3 events that we need to plan for. There's the before event, there's the learning event, the live event we'll call it, and the after event. And we need to think about what materials are we going to give our learners in advance? What are the key materials we're going to use during the live event? And what are the key activities then that we are going to use during the live event? And also after the after event, what are we going to ask them to do? And you can see that some of the learning strategies fit very well with each of the 3 events that are on the screen. And ultimately, going back again to Northampton, the idea of interacting, it's how are the learners going to interact with the content, how are they going to interact with their peers, and how are they going to interact with you? And when you're putting this together, you are ultimately thinking about the purpose. What do you want your learners to experience? What do you want them to leave with? And what are the learning outcomes or the learning goals of your session? And if the flipped classroom approach works, then you will plan for that with your learners. So if you are going to use blended learning or online learning even, it is very important to plan and to create your own unique blends. And we have developed this blended glance card. It's a planning tool, and actually it's now a part of, it can be added into Teams if you're using Microsoft Teams. But it allows you to think about the 6 learning types, and it gets you to think about the flipped classroom, the before, the during, and the after, and it gives you a set of options that helps you to think with. So like any framework, it's a tool to think with. And I'm reminded of a colleague of mine who used to work with me in an online teaching setting, and he once observed to me that teaching online is different to face-to-face, and you just cannot rock up. They were his words. You can't rock up to the online. You need to plan for it. So if you are going to do any blended, and particularly mixing the online with the face-to-face, it needs to be carefully thought through. And this glance card hopefully will help you to get your ideas together, and you can try them out, and then you can share that with others, and it gives you all a common language, and it gives you a set of rubrics that you can share with each other afterwards. So it facilitates discussions among staff around blended learning. So there is a very quick overview of the TeachNimble blended learning process. I hope you find it useful. Many people that we've worked with over the last 15 months have found the process useful in terms of considering where they're going to have the learning take place, the tools, the technologies they're going to use, and also the learning strategies, and putting that together in a thoughtful way. One thing that we always need to consider here are our learners, because they need to be factored in when we are designing these blends. We need to ensure that they are able to participate actively in blended learning. So I hope this has been helpful, and I wish you well in the forthcoming academic year, and that you get a chance to put some of these ideas into practice.
That was great from Michael. So I hope you got lots of insight from that segment. I know for definite I'm going to be taking away those blended glance cards and certainly using those to put into practice. Please remember there's plenty more ideas to ignite your learning from other FET educators on our dedicated FET YouTube channel. But right now we would like you to meet Ona Flynn from Laois Offaly ETB. Ona is going to share her insights and experiences of transforming learning. She's going to look at the innovative healthcare in Laois Offaly ETB, and she's going to talk us through their journey of reviewing the assessment and delivery of the QQI Level 5 Award in healthcare support and how that transformed the learning experiences of that programme. So it's over to Ona.
Hi, my name is Ona Flynn. I'm a teacher here with the Laois Offaly Education and Training Board. I've also got 27 years experience working as a nurse. And when I started working with the Laois Offaly Education and Training Board, I was asked if I would come board and do a review on the healthcare programme. So what I'm going to discuss today with you is what that review entailed, what came from that review, and what's left to do. So our agenda for today really is what the healthcare programme review contained, the recommendations that came from that review, the development of a community of practice for healthcare, and the outcomes from this group. And then where we are now with this review and what we have left to do. And then we'll just close off at the end of this. Okay, so the healthcare review programme. So it was October 2018. A group was set up to look at the assessment and the delivery process of the QQI Level Healthcare Support Award across the LOETB. It was coordinated by the Quality Assurance Department, and an external facilitator was also brought in order to lead the group. Then there was teachers from across the LOETB who all had clinical background in healthcare and who all had experience delivering the programme across different sectors. So 3 meetings were held from October 2018 to December 2018, and a report was produced from each meeting. And out of those reports, it formed the basis of a draft recommendations from that group on the review. So the draft recommendation then was presented to senior management team within the Laois Offaly Education and Training Board in January 2019. So recommendations from this document, what came from it? We have to look at the assessment design and assessor delivery and grading of all the modules across the programme. There was a great risk of variation from teachers on the group. We had teachers from PLC, teachers from part-time, teachers from night class. Myself, I was night class at the time. And that there was different interpretations about the assessments across all of our programmes. So we needed some sort of uniformity, we needed some sort of standardisation to come out of that process. The programme duration then, there was a vast difference here again. Across the centres as to the amount of hours that were actually allocated to delivering these modules. Bear in mind, they're all the very same modules delivered in different contexts. So there was too much variation here, which we felt would also affect the standard of those programmes. The access to resources for teachers. A vast difference across all centres again. At the time, there was only one fully equipped skills lab across the Laois Offaly Education and Training Board. And like myself, most of the teachers talked about going around with a box of equipment in the boot of their car that they'd acquired over time themselves. So we were relying on our teachers too much to provide the necessary equipment. So we had to look at the resources for the teachers. The application process, there was a feel that there was people applying for this course or coming onto the programme that really weren't academically at the correct level at the time. And this again was affecting the delivery of the programme and affecting the standard of healthcare worker that we were sending out to work in the healthcare sector. So we needed to facilitate some sort of consistency so that we could again improve the standard of healthcare worker that we are providing. The class size, massive variation here again, depending on whether you were on a PLC programme in Laois or in Offaly, night classes in Laois or in Offaly, there was huge difference to the amount of students that were part of a class. And nationally, we looked at 18 being the ideal number for a class. But in some cases, I myself, first module I ever taught, I had 26 students in a class. And I mean, it was crazy to try and get, the correct standard and the proper delivery and assessment of all those students. So outcomes from this meeting with the senior management was to develop a community of practice to look at these recommendations in more detail and see how we could improve that standard. This community of practice was to be made up again of teachers from all different areas of the service, members of the Quality Assurance Department so that we could ensure the standard was going to be really high, and someone external also. Senior management at the time felt that the group that had done the review were strong enough, and because they knew exactly where we were going with this, that they should continue on with this work at that time. So that's what happened. We then became the community of practice in healthcare. So the agenda for the community of practice then, what we looked at initially was the enhanced assessor packs had to be designed by this community in practice to ensure that there was consistency. And we felt that if we had a standardised brief template, that this would start, with the improvement in the standard of what we do. So that if I was a student and I went to a part-time class in either Tullamore, Port Tarlington, Abbey Leaks, it didn't matter, I would see the same assessment brief form or assignment brief document coming to me for every module. And in that way, that would make me feel that, I was easier for the student to read as well. They wouldn't be getting confused with different briefs. We had to design an induction process for each course that would be used to cover such attendance, submission deadlines, code of conduct, plagiarism, so that every student, again, across the board, knew exactly where they were, and that the rules applied in every centre. Design an application process to assess the suitability to the programmes, and that would bring consistency across all centres again. And for us, I suppose, the members of the community of practice, we felt very strongly that we were sending these people out to work with our country's most vulnerable. So we were sending them out to care for people when they were at their weakest. So it was very important to us that the standard of healthcare worker we sent out were right up there. And in turn, that would help also if we could get that good reputation of standard of healthcare worker, then if they were to apply for a job, that would put them a little bit above. That they would be able to say, employers would say, they come from the Offaly Education and Training Board, they come with a really high standard, and that would give them a better opportunity of gaining employment. To compile a list of up-to-date equipment to teach skills for all modules and plan for the development of skills labs. So as I said, we recognised we had teachers going around with items in their boots for teaching classes, stuff that acquired themselves. So we needed to go through all the modules and make sure that we had the right equipment there that was up to date and that wasn't vintage, as I've seen in a few centres over the years. That it would ensure the service provider, I suppose, that when the healthcare worker went out, they'd learnt the skills really well. To review the programme module descriptors and generate some sample briefs. When I first started my very first module, I was handed a module descriptor, off you go and teach it. I had no idea what was standardised within the centre at the time. So we thought that if we had some sample briefs, some sample exams, that when new teachers came on board, they could have access to them and it would help guide them and help keep with our standard as well. And then to create a platform where all the teachers could assess all this information whenever they needed it. So where are we now? The assessment brief templates were created in September 2019 and they're in use across all of our centres. I only recently checked on this with the QA department to see is everybody using them, and it does appear that everybody is using them. The marking scheme templates were also created and used across all the centres, and the scheme of work and lesson plan templates were also created. And there's an example here of a marking scheme template that is in use. So we assess that into every module that we deliver. The following modules: infection prevention and control, safety and health, and work experience, team working. They were reviewed by the community of practice, and sample assignment briefs and exams were created for all of those modules. An induction presentation was created for all healthcare and nursing programmes by the QA department and has been rolled out across all the programmes in all the centres in the last year. So when you come in and you join Donegal ETB for the healthcare modules, you get the very same induction. It doesn't matter where you go. And again, this is an outline here of our template for a lesson plan. The decision that team working would be delivered in place of communications for the healthcare award. I think this was a very big thing, because the first time I looked at the communications module, I felt it was more generic for business or other subjects, but not for healthcare. And I remember being asked to deliver the team working on my class in Portlaoise, and I got the template or the module descriptor. It was quite confusing even for me as a teacher to try and decipher how was I going to match what had been designed. So we actually went back through the module descriptor on that, and we changed how we were going to assess it. And it's now integrated in all our healthcare programmes. It's much more relevant to healthcare than communications ever was. It does actually include a lot of issues of communication. And even this summer, I'm looking at going to try and integrate both of those modules together so that they will give even more to the course. The class size is to be no more than 20 students across all our centres. Pre-interview questions documents were created for all applications for the healthcare programme. Interview documents were created with scoring tools attached to assess the suitability of the learner to the programme. Now, that's not saying that we're going to tell people, right, you can't come on the programme at all. If we think people aren't academically up to the level at the time, then we also have a level 4 introduction to healthcare that we might encourage them to take part in first. But obviously, it's healthcare, it's vulnerable people. We have to have a standard. People have to come with a certain level of understanding, aptitude and manner, compassion and everything for healthcare. So this is part of our interview document that we created together, and that is in full use also. The BKSB assessment mandatory for all applicants who must reach level 3, 50% minimum to be considered for the programme module in level 5. Now, the reason we did this again is because you have to have a certain level of academic ability to be able to complete at level 5, to be able to do the modules. It's quite an intense programme. We expect a very high standard from our care workers when our patients, our family members are in the hospital. So we expect the very same. In fact, when our students walk into our classes, I always say to them, you are now a healthcare worker. We are going to act like healthcare workers in our classroom, and I'm expecting a very high standard from you, as if you were looking after your own family member. Skills rooms are now being set up in centres. Some are completed, like this one here in Portlaoise, with essential up-to-date equipment suitable for the teaching of all skills across the modules in healthcare. There's also been a new one which was completed last year in Portarlington. Banagher is currently underway. It's about halfway there. It's almost completed. Actually, a lot of the equipment has just been bought, and we've just started one here in Tullamore recently. So we're making great grounds on that. And again, with these skills rooms, we get to teach the proper skills. People get to practice them in a simulated environment, that is very consistent for when they go out into the workplace. Two of our teachers here in Tullamore, myself is one of those, and we have completed our patient moving and handling instructor training. We also felt this would increase the standard, because then we can control the standard of that training also that we give to our students, so that we don't have to be employing in externals all the time. All modules have a minimum of 42 hours delivery time, with special consideration for some modules. So we have acknowledged that some modules, like anatomy and physiology in our nursing programme, it's quite a serious module, quite a lot of content, and sometimes centres at their own discretion will give extra hours towards that module in order, because it's very important for those students. They need a distinction if they want to go on and do their nursing. So what's next for the programme? Review of measures already in place to see if they're working to increase the standard. Continue with the review of the module descriptors for remaining modules and create sample assessment briefs for those. Continue to develop and update skills rooms across all our centres. and training and upskilling for our teachers in patient movement and handling, first aid responder, so that we can deliver our own training here for our own students. And this should help overall improve the standard of the programme that we deliver. So that's all I have for you today. And I mean, for me personally, from the first day I started to right now, I've seen massive experience, and I'm only with Yellow ETB full-time for a year and part-time for about 4 years. And I've seen a huge increase in the standard of the healthcare worker we send out there. In fact, one of my students this year had been here in 2011 and didn't complete the programme and came back this year on the PLC, and she said it was unbelievable to her how high the standard has got and how the massive improvements that have been across the programme. So I suppose that's a testament to the work that we've done. So that's all from me. Thank you very much.
Great. So that was Una's segment, where we witnessed the power of collaboration with many different stakeholders who work together in a community of practice, all working towards a shared common goal, and how that contributed to their review and its success. Up next, we're going to have Ciara Flynn and Aisling Kinnear from the Cavan Institute in Cavan Monaghan Education and Training Board. In this segment, they're going to talk us through how they've used coaching to support teachers' digital transformation during the pandemic, using the crawl, walk, run model, and how that dedicated coaching provision will continue in Cavan Institute into the next academic year.
Hello and welcome to our presentation. My name is Aisling Kinnear and I am the Teaching and Learning Coordinator at Cavan Institute. I've also been teaching for many years in the design department, and I'm very fortunate to work with an extremely enthusiastic team of people in promoting our teaching and learning within the Institute.
Hi, I'm Ciara Flynn and I'm delighted to join Aisling today to tell you a little bit about our journey this year. I have taught music and music technology in Cavan Institute for just over 10 years now, and I'm really passionate about the use of technology in all things teaching and learning. We really hope you enjoy our session today and that you can take something away from it.
The COVID-19 pandemic in March 2020 significantly interrupted life and created undeniable chaos in the disruption of education provision across the globe. Face-to-face teaching in colleges like Cavan Institute was halted immediately, and programme delivery had to be reorganised and assessment processes reimagined for learners. At that time, the commitment and creativity of staff at the Institute was called upon to safeguard the continuity of teaching and learning, and quick solutions had to be found while maintaining as a priority the well-being of students and teachers. The starting point for us at the Institute was a teaching and learning team leader who assisted the management team in putting an emergency remote learning plan in place. This work of transitioning students and staff to working and learning remotely was to become a central feature of our work moving forward. While we had successfully facilitated students to complete their course of studies from March to June 2020, it was evident that there were challenges to be addressed in terms of supporting staff to make the transition to complete online provision. We allocated 2 teachers who had achieved certification in Microsoft Innovative Educator Expert to work on a full-time basis with staff for the year in a training and coaching capacity. Coaching played a major part in supporting the change that took place. Strong relationships were developed based on trust and a recognition of the ability of the 2 coaches to work with staff, to listen to their concerns and assisting them in arriving at solutions. This was key. Provision for the ongoing development of digital skills for staff and students remains a part of planning for the new academic term in September 2021, where plans are being developed to create and build an ethos in the college around digital transformation, to advance learning paths for staff using the crawl, walk and run model, putting in place a programme for students in the skills needed to participate in blended learning, to encourage more digitally experienced staff to achieve formal recognition for their efforts. And we're also considering incentives for staff to engage in these pathways. My experience as principal of the Institute on this journey has been really humbling, as I have witnessed firsthand the commitment, determination and tenacity of the teachers with whom I have the privilege of working with. I'm immensely proud of what they have achieved for their students and for themselves, and I look forward to what is to come on this journey.
As educators, the students are always at the heart of everything that we do. The students that started with us in September were coming to us after an already difficult couple of months. As Anne-Marie outlined in the previous video, we also knew that this academic year was going to be very challenging. The quote that we've shown in this slide from Elena Aguilar outlines what is at the heart of our presentation. It's not possible to transform the experience for students without looking after teachers' social, emotional and learning needs. So what do we mean when we talk about coaching? At the beginning of the year, when anyone asked us what our role was, we would have said that we were providing technical support for teachers to support blended learning. It was only as the months progressed and we really dipped our feet into the water that we realised we were doing an awful lot more than this. Our role was definitely not just about training and fixing problems. We found a really accurate description of what our role was during a talk by Becky Keane at the Microsoft E2 conference this year. She described a coach as a guide, an encourager, a problem solver, a collaborator, and a listener. It's an awful lot more than just providing technical support.
In order to scaffold and frame what was happening, we incorporated the crawl, walk and run model. We planned and facilitated an intensive 3-week training programme for all of our teachers in September. Daily sessions were organised with the aim of getting all staff to the crawl stage so they were able to run interactive online classes using both Microsoft Teams and OneNote Class Notebook. Teachers were placed into training groups and even given homework to do with their peers. Once everybody was crawling successfully, we began to the walking stage. The focus now was on digital assessment. We introduced apps like Flipgrid, Kahoot, Stream, Whiteboard and Forms. And we focused on student engagement and interactivity. We also gave teachers tips and guidance on best practice for setting up assignments in teams to ensure that all of the work was easily organised for them in the background on the Teams SharePoint site. We wanted to make sure that digital assessment wasn't adding to people's time, so we got everyone up and running with 2 screens for correcting. We already had many runners in the college, but because we decided to make the leap from Moodle to Microsoft Teams as our virtual environment, even our runners needed some guidance. The aim at this level was for staff to be able to seamlessly and confidently integrate technology into their daily teaching practice. To support the model outlined, these structures were offered to our staff. Firstly, we worked on building a supportive online community through a dedicated staff team. We posted latest news, training sessions, and encouraged staff to ask and answer any questions that they had. Secondly, we created video tutorials which were contextualized to our own setting. Staff could avail of these tutorials through the dedicated staff team. We held weekly group training sessions where staff could register to attend these sessions, which suited around their own timetables. We focused on different topics every fortnight, and they were based on topics that staff would need at those particular times in their teaching. For example, setting assignments, correcting work. Student engagement remained on the agenda for the entire year. We also hosted regular drop-in Q&A sessions with our staff, which acted as a great means for them to connect, which was often a very lonely day teaching at home. Finally, staff could arrange to book in for one-to-one support sessions with us.
From piano assessments in Flipgrid to hair dyeing in breakout rooms, we saw a little of everything this year. And on this slide is some of our favourite tools. What we're most proud of is that we managed to fully maintain teaching, even in practical subjects, during the periods of lockdown this year. We also managed to have 100% digital assessment this year. And we're currently working on trying to tally up the figures about how much money we've saved and how many trees we've saved. We were already piloting the use of OneNote Class Notebook for e-portfolios, and this number greatly increased this year. Class Notebook was used for all work experience and personal and professional development modules, and teachers in areas like design, multimedia and makeup also implemented this model very successfully. Let's take a look now at some of our teachers' experiences on the tools that they used this year.
But I found consistently I came back to Flipgrid. I thought it was a great way online for students to record themselves. And again, trying not to do it in a passive way, you know, having scenarios where students had to record a staff demonstration as if they were in the workplace, or a student being able to record, you know, their reflection and evaluating their work experience.
I was able to deliver live cooking classes to my students while being at home. The college provided me with the dual camera system, and coach helped me to set up all of it in my kitchen throughout the teams. One camera was set up beside the cooker and second on the worktop. It allowed me to move around the kitchen and switch between the cameras. All students who joined me online could see clearly what I was doing and could even hear the sound of the food cooking.
I really enjoyed the use of the notebook during my teaching year this year. It had a fantastic ability to share my notes to individual students, and then it was super that I was able to monitor the students' progress throughout the year, so I could see when they were accessing documents, how much they'd added, and then I had the ability to give them feedback, and I give that feedback in note formation or in an audio file, and the students engaged really, really well with it. It was a really positive learning outcome.
And I find the students really liked Kahoot. It was great crack. Not only that, the Kahoot that I had, I could literally search, put in hair colour, and I would get a bank of questions.
So whiteboard, I use that for teaching. I teach music and music theory, so it was directly like using a whiteboard. I was able to share it to the class immediately on Teams.
Because what the breakout rooms did was they meant that I could divide the classes. I could go into each room. So I would set a task, divide the class, and then they would work on that project themselves. But I can go into each room and chat and talk.
Okay, so let's talk about why this model worked for us. We did a study in 2018 with our teachers, and it identified time, lack of training, and being unsure of the possibilities as the greatest barriers in using technology. While we were able to address two of these with our support, overall we felt that it was really important in our structure that we had already established a relationship with our teachers. They trusted us, and there was no fear over asking what might have been deemed a silly question. There was also a social aspect to our work this year. One of our teachers described the reality of working on Teams all year meant that they were working in isolation, in an office, on their own, all day, every day. So the support structures had so many other benefits outside the development of digital competence. Staff had time to come together, to collaborate, to talk, to chat, to run ideas by each other. So let's hear from some of our teachers who describe the impact that the support structures put in place had on them and their teaching.
The support staff in Cavan Institute were there for us. I always felt that we were supported, even in the very beginning when we were first doing our classes. There was somebody there who was kind of able to come in and help if we got into any trouble, and that was a huge safety net for me, and it gave me a little bit more confidence about how to do what I was doing.
All the time we had the underpinning support team behind us, and it really made what was the scary start to the year into a very successful year. There was one thing, being able to use the technology and being confident, and the help and support we got actually helped that. But actually it ended up transitioning us into using technology not in a passive way but in a proactive way, and being able to be really inventive with how we ran teams, how we had meetings, how we engaged the students. And I suppose for me it increased my means of expression online. It provided me with lots of different ways that I could teach my coursework.
I could go to these two teachers and go, what do you think about this? Where is this? What could it do? I'm doing this, I need something, and I would get answers and inventive ideas, and it was just superb, absolutely and utterly superb. Love trying new things, and I was able to say to the students, I'm going to try this week. This is something I learned last week. This will be good fun. Even getting them to work while I'm working, or getting them all to work in a collaborative space together.
With the support again from the teaching and learning, it was brilliant, especially the one-to-one really enhanced my digital skills, and going forward for the next term I'm feeling more confident.
Hand on heart, that one-to-one was invaluable to me. I could not have had the year I had without that support. And I am super thankful to management for putting it in place.
The students as well, you know, enjoyed the online learning, but this has completely revolutionised my teaching. And I actually hope that online stays.
I've changed with regards to technology. Still not really great, but now, you know, not as afraid of it as I was. So I definitely think that support-wise, you know, we got lucky. Okay.
There is no doubt about it. There is no going back from using technology for teaching and assessment. There's so much excitement among our staff about what they've achieved, and they're already talking about what they can do next year and how they can implement what they've done this year into their face-to-face classrooms whenever we get back to normal. One thing that's clear from our experience this year is that we need to transform the structures and incentives around teacher professional development always, not just during a pandemic. Often we squeeze in professional development at the end of a long day or during Croke Park hours with no follow-up or additional support. We need this to change. Let's think again now about our students who are at the centre of everything that we do. Again, we need to make sure that they are always achieving their best. And to do this, it is necessary that we provide teachers with the support they need. Our presentation has shown that this has been achieved through coaching and through the provision of adequate in-house support structures. Teachers' digital skills are becoming ever more important as we aim to prepare our students for life and work in the future. Our teachers have managed to achieve years' worth of digital transformation in just a few months. Imagine what they could achieve if this model were in place always. The Staff of 2030 Future Ready Teaching Report, sponsored by Microsoft, backs our experience up. In this report, they state that contact with coaches and teachers having beliefs in their own ability can improve student achievement. Why not take all of this into account as we move past this period and explore these structures in an Irish context a little more?
Finally, we really hope that you have enjoyed our presentation, and thanks so much to the organisers of FET Fest for allowing us to talk about our journey. A huge thanks to our amazing teachers in Cavan Institute. We are so proud of what you have achieved, and thank you for allowing us to share your experiences.
So thank you so much to Cavan Institute for sharing that piece around their coaching model. Now we're going to go to Patrick McLaughlin. Patrick is an ESOL tutor from Loughrea Adult Learning Centre in Galway and Roscommon ETB. And Patrick is going to talk us through how he used Book Creator for storytelling with his learners who have English as a second language and who come to him with a wide variety of digital capabilities.
My students come from everywhere in the world now at this stage. We have students from Southeast Asia, South America, Europe, all adults with varying levels of English. So we try to divide them between lower level English and higher level English, and varying levels of technology proficiency as well. Originally, we set up group emails. So everything was by group email. So I would send out something and then they could reply to me just personally. They wouldn't reply to the group, they just replied to my email. So I send out reading homework, grammar homework, writing exercises, and that's all replied to then on a one-to-one basis. But then we also set up Zoom classes, and not everyone attends, but the attendance was pretty good. Say you could get 60 or 70% of the students attending a Zoom class. And that's really where the idea for using Book Creator came in, because the Zoom classes were mainly speaking practice, where you would give them a question 2 days before the class and they'd have time to prepare their answer. And it could be something really simple like, tell me why you came to Ireland, how you felt when you came to Ireland, and what your first impression of Loughrea was, for example. So they'd have a few days to think about it, they'd speak about it, and then you could correct their grammar online. And you could also, if someone didn't have a lot to say, you could probe and ask them additional questions, and other students could ask them questions. The next step would be to correct the homework, and not correct everything. leave something for them to correct also, and then return it to them, obviously, so they get to see their corrected writing. And then ask them for the photographs for the books for Book Creator. So if they had a photograph of home, now most people were getting images from Google, for example, but still they're choosing the photographs that they want with their writing, and that's really the important thing. Then I would make the books on Book Creator because there's no other option at the moment. I think in the long run, obviously what you want is, if you were in a classroom and everybody had the iPads, they could see how easy it is to do. And it's so easy to copy the text from a Word document into Book Creator that they could easily do it themselves and make their own books. And that would be the ultimate thing. Well, once the book is created, you have two options on Book Creator. You can save it as a PDF, which the students can actually access very easily. Then they can open it, you can return it to them. Or you can save it as a video, and then that video can be converted very easily and uploaded onto the GRETB ESOL YouTube channel. The best thing is they're really, really proud of them. I mean, they're actually sharing them with their own friends. Some of the views on some of them, especially some of the videos from India. I mean, it would be amazing if they went viral in India. We'd have millions of views. But I mean, obviously, they're sharing them with their friends, and their friends are looking at them. And one student told me she showed what she had done to her husband and son and played it on the TV screen at home. And, you know, they're very proud of her then, obviously, because their English is actually stronger than hers. But, you know, they can see the work that she's done, and they can all see the work that they've created, and they can share it with each other. And again, that goes back to one of the biggest things with ESOL is a lot of writing homework is done on a piece of paper, it's corrected, and it ends up, that's it. There's no other purpose to it. Whereas there's a purpose to this where they're sharing stories with the other students and with their friends. And it's like, look what I've done. And it's nice.
Thank you to Patrick for sharing with us how Book Creator gave his students a real sense of achievement and pride in their work. Finally, we're going to have Charles Gorney, an Adult Education Officer in Donegal ETB. Charles is going to show us how Donegal ETB's 4 brand new digital hubs are engine rooms of teaching and learning. Trassa McGinley, who's Donegal's TEL coordinator, will show and talk us through how the hubs support accessibility and inclusion for both staff and learners, and how these hubs will certainly ignite learning. After this segment, the live event will end. But please remember that we have over 30 other innovative and creative projects and ideas shared from all of our ETBs across the sector, with lots and lots of ways that you can ignite your learning, and they're all over on our FET Fest YouTube channel.
Donegal ETB have introduced a number of digital hubs across our FET centres. The purpose of the digital hubs is to provide an inclusive learning space for both our staff and students. They've been funded through the Mitigating Against Educational Disadvantage Fund. The digital learning hubs themselves allow for increased accessibility and inclusion for learning. Some of our students might not have broadband facilities or some of the technology in their homes, and the digital hubs themselves will give them an opportunity to come in and use the resources. Staff from across the Donegal ETB's FET service may want to plan a TEL mentoring session with one of our TEL mentors. The digital hubs themselves provide an opportunity for them to do this.
There are 4 digital hubs located throughout Donegal. They are located in FET centres in Stranorlar, Milford, Ballyshannon and Buncrana. A designated TEL support tutor is available to support students and tutors in each centre at specified hours per centre. A range of digital learning tools are available that will enable tutors to expand their repertoire of technology-enhanced learning to facilitate universal design for learning.